Okay, my name's Dusty, and I'm making a series of videos that go over Instagram strategy for woodworkers and makers and people that are trying to gain traction on Instagram. I've grown from 0 to over 170,000 followers. I've made some mistakes, and I've got some tips and tricks that I think work largely over time. The first video that I made was a broad overview of kind of the functioning components of Instagram. And now what I'd like to do is go over the second sort of broad strategy behind Instagram before we get into kind of the details of how everything works. Okay, so as a maker, what you're trying to do is create a strategy that will allow you to make money, right? Like, and either you're trying to sell some of the stuff that you've got, or you're trying to grow a brand, grow awareness, or grow your influence in some way, ideally, so that you can make money on it and feed your family. And so there's a lot of questions that come around this idea of what I should and shouldn't post, and I feel like, and I did this, and a lot of people, they kind of see some people, they look for somebody that looks like they're successful, and they kind of just sort of imitate a bit of this guy, and they imitate a bit of this girl, and they see, well, this guy's posting pictures of this, and this guy's doing it this way. And so what it ends up looking like on your Instagram is a dog's breakfast, where you're kind of just trying a whole bunch of things out. And I think there's more value in a focused strategy about the profile that you're trying to portray, as opposed to just randomly posting different things about food and vacations and family and tips and tricks or saws or different things. I think you do need to be focused. I think that it's important to do that. I think that people are going to expect a certain type of content when they follow your account, and if you deviate from that too drastically, it's distracting. And people say the reason I come here is for this, and why are you all of a sudden showing me the pancakes that you're eating in Mexico? So one of the things that I did initially was I went online and I looked for an account that I thought was something that I wanted to be like. Something that, an account that I found myself going to look for inspiration, an account that I found myself going to and not being distracted, or an account that I found myself going to, not just to see a picture, but to go through everything, because they had a high percentage of really good posts. And for me, that was Porter Barn, the guys out of Arizona. And I liked their photography. I liked the way they did their photography. I liked how it was edited. I liked how bright it was and everything. And so I kind of looked to them. And what I would do is, when I started editing my photos and videos and things like that, I did it to try and make it look like their stuff. I assume they have a professional photographer, because man, this stuff looked really good. So what I would do is I would take a picture, maybe that was somewhat similar, because we're both in barnwood and stuff like that, and I would look to see if my stuff in some way came close to how they were portraying their products, which was barn doors and feature walls and things like that, which is how I got my start. And then over time, my strategy actually ended up changing. So initially it was entirely focused on sort of feature walls and some signs and a few things that I was selling, and rarely did I take pictures of myself. I didn't showcase anything else. It was just only about the products that I was trying to sell. And then over time, as I grew, and I kind of mentioned this, like over time your strategy will kind of change. So over time, as people started asking me more about how I did stuff, at that point, that's when I started showing that stuff. At whatever point, even now when people start asking me about Instagram, it wasn't like I tried 100,000 followers ago to pretend like I knew what Instagram was about. It was only in response to a lot of questions about it that I started giving advice on Instagram, or showing which tools I was using and how I did that. So let's back up for a second and talk about this broad strategy. You as an individual, right? Like whether you like it or not, you are a part of the company. Now you might just be you as an individual, which is like me. There's Dusty Lumber Co., and then there's Dusty me, right? And I think it's kind of, the name of my company came as a result, well, just like any time I've tried to name a company, it's like you spend a whole lot of time stressing about it and thinking about it, and finally at the end I was just impatient enough that I just said, forget it, just call it Dusty Lumber Co. And it's either a marginally clever double entendre or an extreme lack of creativity. So the truth is, my name is Dusty, and the company's called Dusty Lumber Co., and I think it fits because the wood's all dusty and stuff, you get it, right? But initially, I wasn't posting a lot of myself. I wasn't posting anything about it. And I think one of the ways that people shoot themselves in their foot too early is that it seems like everybody's trying to be famous these days. Like everybody's trying to gun in for a TV show. Everybody's trying to be the next TV personality. Everybody wants to be the next whatever. And if you do that too early, when you haven't, remember the analogy where I talked about the guy losing weight? Like if you try to be the weight loss expert when you haven't lost any weight yet, you're gonna fall flat on your face. Wait to take your cues from the market when people start asking you about it and say, hey, look, I see you're having a lot of success with weight loss. Could you give me some tips and advice? At that point, you can start to share that advice. But if you do it too prematurely, then you end up shooting yourself in the foot. You look like you're showboating. You look like you're trying to be the next TV personality. Speaking of TV personalities, one of the other things that I think is kind of shooting people in the foot is it seems like a lot of people are trying to be the next something, right? Like the people are trying to be the next Chip and Joanna Gaines, or the next Cook, or whatever their names are and stuff like that. The reason that's an issue is that nobody really cares about the next somebody, right? Like, it's not that the world doesn't need Chip and Joanna Gaines. They do, but the world has them. It's not that the world doesn't need Simon Cowell. Well, anyways, the world has Simon Cowell, but you're gonna find more value in just being you, being the first you and the only you, than trying to be the mirror image of somebody that you think is successful. You can certainly look to them and say, look, like, I've got the long-term objective to have a silo in the middle of Texas somewhere and people will come and buy home decor goods. Like, that's a noble goal to achieve a life that they have. But it's very hard to try and be the exact next person in that. And one of the reasons why it's hard is that it's very hard to try and be the next someone when you're not that someone. And it comes across as manifestly disingenuous. It's also very hard to try and be someone that you're not and maintain that illusion. It's like trying to maintain a lie, right? Like, imagine you spend all this time pretending to be somebody online that you're not, and you build up this whole following around a fiction that isn't you. And number one, it's exhausting to maintain that. Number two, what happens when you are actually with your real friends and then you happen to run into one of the people that knows you online? Like, which version of you are you going to be? And you're gonna have to do some explaining to somebody at some point. So just be you. Having said that doesn't mean I'm not for changing yourself. It doesn't mean I'm not for personal improvement. Like, if you have a goal to increase your vocabulary so you can be more articulate, if you have a goal for self-improvement, to be less judgmental or to be more comfortable with public speaking, definitely set goals to be a better version of yourself. But it just seems entirely frustrating to try and be the next somebody. There's more value in being a genuine, improving you than trying to be the next somebody else, the next somebody who's already made it. And so at the initial stages of Instagram, I didn't focus really much attention on myself at all. Scroll back, I mean, it's kind of exhausting. I've got thousands of posts, but if you go back, there were very, very, very few pictures of me. And it seems like a lot of people right now off the beginning, they're holding up the phone, acting as if they're already famous. And like, there's some value to this whole idea of acting as if. Having said that, too often it comes across as disingenuous. Like, so often people are saying, like, a lot of people ask me this, or I get a lot of questions about that, when it's pretty obvious nobody's really asking you about that. So you could just jump into a segment and say, I've got an idea that I want to share with you about this, instead of saying, oh, look, a lot of people ask me about this. If you've only got 100 followers, it's really unlikely that a lot of people are asking you about something. After you've got tens of thousands of followers, then it's at least believable. And so the point that I'm trying to make is, the more genuine that you can be, the more value there is to that. And this kind of has to do with what I said before as well, this idea of not using too many filters and not being genuine. I think that the appetite for content out there is from real, normal, genuine people who aren't pretending to be anything more or anything less than they really are. And being somewhat candid about themselves, right? Like, my only claim to fame is that I won a goat milking championship. Like, it's crazy, it's funny. Okay, so bottom line is just be you. Be you and showcase your stuff. Initially, you should be posting more about your stuff and your craft and really taking good pictures of your craft, because people aren't buying you. There will come a time where you will work with sponsorships and brands and things like that, but it's after you've built a following based on the stuff that you actually make and the improvement of your craft. Really quickly, I want to point out something that I think is really comical, but that makers can take advantage of. If you look back, there's an irony in the demand for watching people make stuff right now. Society used to be this agrarian type society where the whole objective was to work hard enough as a poor farmer to make enough money to send your kid to school so that they didn't have to work in the field and they didn't have to use their hands and they didn't have to sweat and be exposed to the elements. And you would work really hard, and then you could send your kids off to school, and they could be someone who had a profession and ended up working in an office somewhere. So you fast forward, and that goal, that mission was achieved for a lot of people. A lot of people moved to the metropolis, and now you've got all these people living in these high rises and working in HR departments and accounting and wearing a suit and tie and stuff like that. We've got a litany of health problems, from chronic back pain and obesity, issues with flexibility and stuff like that. When these people achieve the dream of their grandfathers and they got an education, I'm not downgrading education. I think it's important. I'm just saying that you have like this trend in society where everybody left the fields and left the forests and left the workshops, and they started working in buildings. And now that they work in buildings and they have a job in HR and they do something mostly that they hate, when they come by, what I want to look at is how they use their recreative time, how they use their disposable time. So they come home from their job, they negotiate traffic, they ride the bus, they whatever. They come home and they sit down and they watch HGTV. And they essentially watch guys like me and you do stuff that their grandparents did. Right? Like, can you smell the irony? The whole idea was to leave the world of having to do physical labor, to leave the world of being exposed to the element, only to finally have enough time and enough spare time to do exactly what you wanted to do. But the thing that you end up doing is watching HGTV, and you watch the thing that your grandparents used to do. And people that make stuff with their hands and go and start gold mines and renovate houses and build tree houses, those people are actually in demand, right? They've become the abnormality. And so there's a huge demand in the broader public right now for people that are makers. People have a hunger and a thirst to know how and to see how to do this stuff. And that's something that I think that you should calculate into your overall strategy of who you're trying to portray. You're a person that makes stuff with your hands, and you're steadily improving in your craft, and you're getting new tools and doing new things, and you're working through the hardships of life and negotiating how to make money and and have a family and stuff like that. Okay, so kind of the last thing that I want to say about this whole idea of developing, the parameters of what you're going to post. Whatever your craft is, you're going to be posting that. How you do that, you're going to be posting that. You're going to get really good at pictures of whatever your stuff is, whether you're trying to just build a brand or you're trying to sell a specific product. You're going to put forth your very best foot in terms of your photos and your videos and things like that. And the last thing that I want to kind of point out is what to and to not post. Like, there's some things for sure. Like, you're not going to be posting pictures of your vacations. Don't post pictures of your food. Don't post pictures really of anything outside of what's going on inside the workshop. There are a couple exceptions, and different people fall on different sides of this line. For example, posting pictures of your family. I've chosen not to do that very much. I've put a few up here and there, kind of to test the waters and stuff. And I know some people that do it that are very good at it and successful, and it's part of them as an individual, as a maker, like trying to feed their family, and they've got a child and do it. And there are some people that do it really, really well. And I want you to think about this autobiographically, right? Like, this is how I looked at it, and as I mentioned in the first video, when you see somebody else post pictures of their family, how do you react to that? Do you stop and click and enjoy it or comment about it? Or do you quickly go over it? If you find yourself more quickly going over it, because remember, like, the mentality of the individual that's consuming content is kind of flicking through. And if all of a sudden they come across your family, does that make them stop? I know that we all have an infinite amount of love, right, for our family members. And I know that love translates into action and sacrifice and discipline to go out and do stuff that might suck or hurt or take a long time because you want to support and help them. And I think that a lot of the reason why people post a picture of their family is that subconsciously what they're trying to say is that if I can show you this picture of this family and somehow transfer to you what I'm feeling inside of me about my family, then you'll be more inclined to buy my stuff. And the truth is I just don't think that it does that. Everybody loves the crap out of their kids, right? Especially when they're young. When they turn teenagers, then you get a little bit frustrated. But that love is not really transferable, especially to perfect strangers. It's more transferable to people who also have a family because they understand what it's like, but I don't think that it's immediately attention grabbing. When I look at any one of the variables about how I post stuff, it either is the case that there's a positive correlation between the amount of times that I post it and the amount of reaction or positive things I get out of it. There's a negative, or it's neutral. And I'm on the fence when it comes to family. I think that sometimes it does good, and I think that sometimes it maybe is distracting. I think, and so for me, it was kind of like in the middle enough. It's not overwhelmingly negative, but I didn't find it overwhelmingly positive. And so I chose not to. Now, you can make your own judgment when it comes to this type of stuff. I don't criticize people that do it, but I want you to analyze it. If you post pictures of your family, I want you to go back afterwards and look at how it performs in relation to the rest of your posts. And if it performs really, really well, then keep doing it. If you find that it is statistically performing below what it normally does, then I think the writing's on the wall. At some point, people might start to care. The more followers you get, what you're going to notice is the more people start to care about you individually. Initially, you're just another guy in the rat race. You're another girl in the rat race. The more that people follow you over time, the more they start to develop a bit of a distance friendship with you, and the more they start to care about you a bit more. And they'll start to ask you about your family. They might ask you where you grew up, or how you stay motivated, or what were the circumstances that you started your business. And at that point, you can start to do that. Like people do care about celebrities' families and kids. People kind of do care, and they even know the names of Chip and Joanna Gaines' kids and stuff like that. So there is a point where that might transition, but if you're just starting off, it's really hard to transfer into buying action the love that you have for your family to a perfect stranger. Okay, another issue would be politics. Should I or shouldn't I discuss politics? And I'm all for patriotism. I'm all for loving your country, and I'm all for trying to do your very best to be socially involved to try and bring about the change that you want to see happen. Having said that, if you're a woodworking page, you're playing this game where there's like 7 billion people on Earth, and you keep on cutting it down, and you're English speaking, so you only have the English speaking population left over, and then you're trying to find only those people that like your craft. They like woodwork or exercise or Pokemon cards or whatever the case is, and there's a reasonable amount of people that will follow that, and you're trying to appeal to all of those individuals. When you start to talk about politics, whatever that threshold is, let's say there's 1 million people that like woodwork, as soon as you start talking about politics, you're pretty much cutting that in half right off the start. I mean, that's a little bit unfair, because there are some people on both sides of the aisle that at least are tolerant enough to still be able to listen to you even though you rant and rave about politics. But why take that risk, right? I'm not saying don't be involved in politics. I'm just saying if it's a woodworking page, why cut the number of people that you could have access to right in half? Whatever your field is going to be, you're going to have some reasonable expectations, right? Like I've got 170,000 followers, which in woodwork is pretty cool. For Taylor Swift, that's horrible. Like if I was a music star, having 170,000 followers would be a kick in the face. If I had 170,000 followers as a Pokemon guy, I would be a god, right? Like there's if Pokemon's your deal. And like my kids love Pokemon, I'm not knocking it, but if Pokemon's your deal, you have to acknowledge that there's only a very small percentage of the entire world that care enough about Pokemon. So if you're trying to build an online presence on Instagram so that at some point you can monetize Pokemon, you've got to be really realistic about your expectations. It is very unrealistic that you're going to get millions of followers and in some way be able to monetize that if you're a Pokemon guy. Having said that, if you're a Pokemon guy and you love Pokemon, do Pokemon. Just have reasonable expectations. And so you have to look within your industry, if you're in fitness or physiotherapy or whatever the case is. But when it comes to politics, like my theory is, why offend half the people by being overtly political? It's one thing to encourage people to be patriotic and go out and vote. It's one thing to say we're closing our store down because we're going to go and exercise our right to vote today. But to get out and be hardcore political campaigning, especially if it's offensive, I think you're shooting yourself in the foot. You just stick to your craft. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking. That was, I think, a good enough overview of how you draw parameters around the message you're trying to portray, about the person that you're trying to portray, and about the profile that you're trying to showcase to people. The reason that it's important to do that is that will end up informing a lot of your decisions on what to and not to post. If you start drawing lines about what you do and don't post. But again, like, look at it autobiographically. When you see certain types of posts from people that maybe have the same number of followers as you, or more or less, how do you react to those types of posts? How do you react to people posting pictures of their food? How do you react to people posting pictures of the vacation that they took? And if you find that you react overwhelmingly positive and you want to consume more of their content, then do more of that. If you don't find that is compelling you to go and spend more time on their page, then I think the writing's on the wall.